today's presentation for the Scaling Up initiative. Today's presenters are Lori Scott and Nicholas Moy with the NatureServe, and they will be discussing the Landscope program and effort. As a reminder, the Scaling Up, which is again the Park Service's landscape conservation effort, has a toolkit which is on your screen right now, and I encourage everyone with the Park Service to explore this toolkit website, and you can also see past webinar presentations. If you click on the webinar tab, there's a lot of other good information here that again I encourage you to explore. Lori Scott is the Chief Information Officer for NatureServe, and NatureServe is a conservation science nonprofit that works with a network of more than 80 partners throughout the U.S., Canada, and Latin America and the Caribbean to collect decision quality data about imperiled species and ecosystems. And Nicholas Moy is the Communications and Design Specialist for the Landscope NatureServe's Landscope effort for the Chesapeake. So with that, I'm going to pass the controls over to Lori and Nick. And then real quick, as a reminder for folks, if you have questions, we're going to have following the presentation, we'll have a Q&A. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them into the questions tab on your toolbar for the GoToWebinar, and then we'll go back and revisit those questions following the presentation. So with that, I'll pass it over to Lori and Nick.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased to present to you on the Scaling Up webinar series today, and I scrolled through some of the names and recognized some familiar partners from the Chesapeake program. So let's get started. So just to begin, we wanted to make sure those who aren't aware of NatureServe have a little background on who we are and what we do. And Brian gave a little bit of that introduction, but we do represent a network of biodiversity information centers in all the places shown in green on that map. So throughout North America and into parts of Latin America, Caribbean, South America. And what we focus on is collecting information on species and ecosystems, in particular focusing on those that are more at risk, and then serving that information and doing a lot of the decision quality analyses and information products. Fundamentally, we focus on answering the questions of what exists, where it is, and how it's doing, and then working with practitioners to help that feedback loop of whether actions are being effective and tracking progress towards conservation goals. And our information is used by all sectors: government, researchers, university, practitioners, corporations, etc. The NatureServe and the National Park Service have a long-standing partnership. It predates myself and Nick. I've been with NatureServe 17 years, and for those who aren't familiar, NatureServe actually has a history that goes back to the Nature Conservancy when they established this network of natural heritage programs and information centers. And we've been involved in things like the National Vegetation Classification Standard and mapping activities for over 40 years as part of PNC and now as NatureServe and members of the USNBC partnership and others. So we've worked with the inventory and monitoring program, and we've done work assisting with assessing the integrity of ecosystems. And then more recently, we've partnered with the Park Service on developing web tools like Landscope Chesapeake, which we're going to show you today. And another joint effort is Explore Natural Communities, and that is going to be featured in next month's webinar in August. So I wanted to give a a plug for signing in next week to hear our colleague Judy Teague, who's going to present on Explore Natural Communities, which focuses on, at a smaller scale, individual parks focus right now on the National Capital Region. But this is a growing platform with more park maps being added this year. So stay tuned for that. So on with the Landscope tour. This is the URL. It's publicly available. And it's been online for 6-7 years now, and it's continued to grow and evolve, and we're really excited about the progress of activity in the Chesapeake in particular, and Nick's going to demonstrate the site live in the second half of the webinar, but I'm first going to give you a little introduction and tour of how the tool works in general. There are over 400 map layers in the tool now, and it's growing all the time. And some of these are at a national scale, some regional, and some state. It's more than a data clearinghouse. It's really topical, and we focus on getting data from authoritative sources, and more we're sourcing the data straight from the partners so they can serve their maps up through services, and that way they're dynamic and updated as the information changes. And we focus on documenting conservation values on the ground, and not just for biodiversity, which is NatureServe's main focus, but for other types of values: recreation, scenic, cultural, historic, working lands, etc. So the goal of the site when we first built it, and continues to this day, is really focused on making sure that the land protection and conservation investments are effective and that they're able to happen strategically. So we want to guide and inform and inspire place-based collaborative conservation. And we do that through the mapping tool, but also on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a media toolbar as well. So we have photos and stories and videos which can help augment the map data and help inspire and inform people through more visual storytelling, narrative ways. So it is free, it's online, it guides collaborative conservation. And this is these are a series of screenshots from a story map, and we'll have a link to this story map at the end that you could visit on your own to, look into it in more detail. So the way Landscope works is it does have this multimedia and editorial content as well as mapped content. And there are different ways to explore and view the map data. So one of those ways is using this map layer toolbar. And if you kind of click through the add layer button, you can find all of those 400+ maps. You can filter them by theme. Here we're showing map layers filtered on recreation. You could also filter by title, so you could type in a word like habitat. Here, waterfronts was typed in, and there's just the one working waterfronts layer from Maryland. When you're working with the layers, you've got a map composed of the layers you want to view, you can use a little toolbar here to the left of the layer name to move layers up and down, and so draw one in a different order above the other. If, say, you have one that's more obscuring and you want the points on top. And then for any given layer, you can also expand that toolbar and do things like change the opacity of the layer if you want to have it more transparent, and you can view the metadata to learn more about the data provider and how that information was compiled, and any caveats or other relevant details about the source of the data. In terms of the sharing and collaboration aspect of Landscope, you can save a map, and this is the one feature on Landscope where you will be asked to log in. If you haven't registered, you'll be asked to create an account. That is so that we can have a place to store the map you wish to save in your profile. If you don't need to save it for the long term, you could just share the map, and that can be done on the fly. But then there's this URL that you can send via email or social media, and the person you send it to or share it to your network, they can follow that link, and the same map you were viewing is sort of reconstituted. So it knows where you were zoomed in, which layers were turned on, and if you had drawn on the map and annotated it with lines or labels and other text, that would persist as well. So that's a pretty handy and powerful tool, all in a free online mapping application. The multimedia toolbar can be accessed on the right or by clicking on the icons on the map, and this opens a little thumbnail of the article or photo or video, and then if you click on that, it opens it up in full screen. Another feature I want to highlight on Landscope is the map reporting tool. So this is a way to help share and report on progress towards conservation goals, and Nick will show that in a bit more detail for how that's working in the Chesapeake. But if you click on that map report tool, first you can select from a number of categories. In this case, the land protection category is selected. There's also species and organizations and ecological information that you can analyze and report out. Within a given category, then you can pick an option. So in some cases, there's more than one data source. Like in the case of land protection, we've got national data from the Protected Areas database compiled by USGS, but we have another data set from just for the Chesapeake Bay that's updated on a more frequent basis. And so that's the sorts of information we're tracking against in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Within that, you can do a finer scale report if you want to visualize it at the state scale or sub-watershed or county, or if you want to look for the entire bay. And then when you get your results, in this case, it was just protected or unprotected for the state of Maryland. You can view that or you can download that as a PDF. So we also have organizational portals, and this is where the Chesapeake comes in. We have these for each state. Some states are more built out than others, and we're increasingly supporting portals for other types of organizations as well, and we'll return to that in a little bit. But for the Chesapeake, this is where really the Landscope shines, and it's become the shared GIS or collaboration tool for the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, which includes over 40 organizations. Those are all the states in the watershed, NDC, the federal agencies that are involved in conservation for the watershed, other nonprofits like NatureServe, tribes, local government. So it's a very robust partnership. It's been meeting on an annual basis going back a number of years now, and working together towards these shared objectives of protecting an additional 2 million acres throughout the watershed and adding more public access sites. So I'm going to turn it over now to Nick, who's going to demo the site live for you. I'm just handing over the controls.
Great. All right.
I think you want to hit escape so we can get back to the browser.
All right. So I'm Nick, and I'm going to show you guys the Landscope website. So when you go to landscope.org, this is the first page that you land on. And if you're an individual, then you can jump straight to the map, and you can learn a little bit more about Landscope, and you can dive into some of the information that we have from the home page. And so you can jump to the map straight here. You can go using your location or the park that you're in, and you can start pulling up maps as Lori was showing earlier. What I want to show you is the Landscope Chesapeake Portal. So from the home page, you can go straight to the Chesapeake Portal. And so as Lori was talking about, this is the collaborative space and also the outward facing space for the partnerships GIS information. So from here you can find out about the partnership, and you can read a little bit more here about the goals. And the partnership has 5 main goals that you can see listed here, which are farms, forests, habitat, heritage, and health. And they've created a series of goals that they are looking to focus in on and prioritize land protection of inside of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so you can read about those goals on each of these pages. You can also see then what we mapped on each of these. And so this was a initiative where the goal was to try to collect as much GIS information into one comprehensive map for each of these goals and see what we came up with. So this was a mapping exercise that you can now access the results of through Landscope. And so from these goal pages, for example, from the farm page, you can click on this locator map, and it'll bring you to the resulting map that came out of this mapping exercise to find out what priorities in the category of farms are on the map. So I'm going to open the legend, and you can see that through this exercise, there was you can find on the map prime farmland of importance and farmed land and prime farmland of importance that's not farmed. So I'm going to go back to the main home page and go to the locator map that's on that page, and you'll see it'll bring us to a different collection of maps. And then like Lori was saying, these markers show you the videos, photographs, and articles that you can click on, but you can also turn those off. And inside the Chesapeake Bay watershed, you can now see that we've got several layers pulled up all at once that we could filter through, or we can turn on and off. And so these are those maps that were created out of that mapping exercise. And so we can see the legends for them, we can change the transparency, or we can hide them so we can look at one at a time. All right. So I also wanted to show you that there are lots of other layers that you can look through. So this was into that in Lori's portion, where you can go into layers on the map, and you can search by clicking Add Layers, and using any theme, or you could filter by theme. It automatically will filter this list based on the map extent, how far zoomed in you are to the map. And you can check this box in order to show all maps, regardless of how zoomed in you are. And so you can search, if you typed in Chesapeake, for example, you would find map layers that have Chesapeake in the name. And so you can see there's lots of maps that you could add and you could explore on this map. So there's quite a few. In this map, I pulled up some maps that y'all might find interesting. So you can just take a look at this list as a little sample of some of the types of things that are offered in Landscope, specifically for this region. But there are maps across the United States. As Lori showed, some of the other things that you can do is you can then share this map. And so by using this link, you'll be able to share a map that has all of these layers already pulled up in it with the map extent and all of the other things that you've already customized about this map view that we're looking at right now. The next thing I want to show you is the map reporting tool. So by clicking map reports, you can run a series of different reports. And so you can find out you can get information about species conservation, land protection, what organizations are working in a given area, or you can run a comprehensive report. I want to show you species conservation really quick. So we could look at imperiled species, and we can look at that for a given watershed or county. So I'll do it by county. And so it's pulling up a map of counties. So you can see as I scroll around the map, you can look at different counties. And I'm going to choose Shenandoah County. And you can see that it's pulling up a list of all of the threatened and endangered species in this list. Oh. And so you can see there's a NatureServe status, there's the U.S. federal status, and it lists the common name and the scientific name that you can see this. So in this county, there's looks like there's 6 records.
And the name on the left is actually hyperlinked, and it will take you to NatureServe Explorer, which is our online searchable database about all these species of concern, and you can get a sort of full detailed description about the status, the distribution. In this case, it looks like it's endemic to Virginia.
One of the new features that we've been working on is organizations as well. So if you want to look at organizations that were working in a given county, you could look at land trusts, for example, and you could do that by county or watershed as well. And so for this watershed, in this watershed, you could see all of the different organizations, well, in this case, land trusts that are working in this watershed. Great. So that is sort of the meat and potatoes of Landscope, if you will. So we can go back to the presentation and finish up really quick so we can get to questions. Oh, I also wanted to show, so this was built out for the Chesapeake as the portal that I was showing you, but we are currently working on, we're working on portals for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy and, or the Appalachian Trail Landscape Partnership, which is being funded by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and also the Colorado Plateau region. So we're doing similar exercises in mapping for those partnerships are doing those exercises, and they'll be housed at those Landscope portals. Mm-hmm.
And just another note on that the portal portion of Landscope is one that we're actively working on the infrastructure of the website to have more expanded capabilities. So a feature that's coming in our next release will be the ability to embed within a portal page a more custom map view just sort of for that partnership. So in the case where Nick showed you can click on these locator maps, it takes you to the main Landscope map viewer, but it has certain layers turned on. But you're sort of within the full ecosystem of Landscope and have at your disposal every other map layer in there. So for partners who wish to really have a more focused view for their partners, for their geography, for the data that is most important to them, there'd be the ability to embed on a page in the portal that more tailored portal map. So that's something we're building out in this current release, and we're pretty excited about that. The other thing that we'll be adding in this next release is the ability to support mapping conservation projects, so activities on the ground. And this includes restoration or other types of activities. So that's something we'll be announcing and sharing more information about in the coming months. And then if you just click the next slide, we wanted to leave you with a few resources for how to learn more. So here's the email contacts for me and Nick. That story map that I mentioned earlier is linked here. The main Landscope website URL, as a reminder, is at the bottom. And you can find us in your Scaling Up Toolkit under the Maps tab. You can see it's the second link there highlighted. So another handy way to get to Landscope for your future work. And we invite your questions, and we really encourage you to get in touch with us if you would like to work with us to bring more data and content into Landscope for your region. Nick would be a good person to contact for support with getting data into Landscope. As a note on that, all the data in Landscope is also available on ArcGIS Online. So if you use ArcGIS Online and have data in that kind of format, it's pretty straightforward for us to configure and bring your web map into Landscope, and vice versa for you to bring Landscope data into your GIS environment. All right.
Well, thanks, Lori and Nick. Awesome presentation. So folks on the phone and viewing, feel free to add a question using the questions tab there. That's one way to ask a question. We'll also open up the phone lines here in a second here as well. But here I've got a question for you guys to get us started. Who are the main users so far, from as best as you can tell, for Landscope? I mean, is industry using it? Are other federal agencies using it? Who are the main users, and how are they using it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know some of the answers to that, but there's more users out there than we definitely know, in detail the use cases. But by design, Landscope was targeted towards those communities that are involved in or influencing land protection. And so at the bottom of that pyramid, there might be landowners themselves who are, involved in, say, putting conservation easements on their land. So trying to influence and encourage and incentivize that, and encourage, getting folks working with land trusts. Land trust is another community of users that this is targeted for and who are using it. For example, we've been talking with North American Land Trust, which operates, as the name would imply, across North America, and they take good advantage of the information in Landscope, like Nick showed on that report, about species of conservation concern. So, having documented, mapped data around conservation values at a place that could inform the siting of an easement or help document, backstop an easement, the values there, which is part of the requirements, is one big use case. The government agencies that are often involved in influencing and incentivizing and participating in some of these land protection activities. And yes, industry is also a user. We have some supporters of Landscope in the energy industry, for example, who also are involved in land conservation activities. For example, they may have surplus properties, they may be divesting them, and Landscope has helped them to document the conservation value, to negotiate a deal to divest that property with a land trust partner. So both knowing the conservation values and then finding out where the land trusts are that are operating in that area are both tools that have been supported by and are helpful to industry.
Great. So what online database do you guys use? Is the data all stored on ArcGIS formats?
Yes, the data are all stored in ArcGIS format, and the website infrastructure itself is on servers that are hosted by NatureServe. But we utilize ArcGIS Online as a configuration tool. So some data the web map is pointing to a map service that may be hosted by the data provider, a state agency or a nonprofit partner or a federal agency. That's the case with many of the maps that Nick showed for the Chesapeake, coming from Chesapeake Bay Program federal partners and the state of Maryland, the state of Pennsylvania, and so forth. So it's a sort of a hybrid infrastructure where we leverage ArcGIS Online. We create a web map for every layer you see in the tool, and we tag them. So if you went in ArcGIS Online and you searched on the word Landscope, you would find those 400 plus web maps. And then if you clicked on an individual web map, you would find underneath it the underlying map service, which might have a NatureServe map server address or a partner's map server address.
Okay. That makes sense. So another question, it's called Landscope, but do you guys have much data on marine resources such as in the Chesapeake Bay?
We would like to have more marine data. We have a little bit in the Chesapeake. I don't know if you want us to just answer or show. I mean, there's a little bit in there, but there's more. We definitely would encourage more. So I know I almost thought about trying to buy the URL C-scope for a project recently, but it was already taken. But we are thinking about land and water for sure. There's a number of data sets that I can think off the top of my head that include water quality and some benthic and other blue water infrastructure types of resources. Currently, a lot of those are more inland water and not as much marine, but we encourage and invite more marine data, and we'd love to have it.
Yeah, it's a whole other world. So what national and regional historic and cultural preservation organizations do you work with?
So the National Trust for Historic Preservation is one of the partners in the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership. And then within the state agencies, the SHPOs, the State Historic Preservation Officers, we're reaching out as a partnership to multiple agencies in each state to get the best information we can across the suite of values, conservation values that are being mapped and identified. And then within the federal agencies as well, the Park Service's role, I think that map that Nick showed in one of his composites, those indigenous and cultural landscapes, I think that is, Suzanne, I think might be on the call. I think she might be someone who contributed within the Park Service to that modeling effort. Am I missing any, Nick?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I guess, yeah, there's there's the historic trust sites, there's heritage areas. Maybe Nick, you should just open the map just so we have that on screen while we're looking at some of these questions. You could open the map layer toolbar, and if you just go to add layers and maybe just type on historic or HIST, you'll kind of see some of the stuff we have in here as an example. Or cultural is another term. Go ahead if you have other questions queued up there.
Well, this is Brian. I had another one for you guys. Is there much cross-pollination between Landscope and, I know like some of the LCCs have similar kind of tools, or and then there's that energy zone planning tool as well. I know probably a lot of the same information is on both. Is that right?
Yeah, so in the LCCs, in the Chesapeake Partnership, the North Atlantic LCC is a partner that we've worked a lot with on these mapping of the Chesapeake Bay-wide goal maps. They were a lead partner in the habitat map that is shown there, and we have other data from the North Atlantic LCC, and yes, in terms of cross-pollination, interoperability is a goal of ours, and we've worked with North Atlantic LCC, the Chesapeake Chesapeake Conservancy, who's another partner in the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, and others where there's different map viewer tools out there, but they can both display and point to and take advantage of the same underlying map services. So Nick is actually, one of his tasks in the near term is to go and look out nationally across all the LCCs for some of those composite, prioritizations that have been emerging, blueprints. There are different names in different LCCs in different regions, but there's one in the South Atlantic. There's various mapped layers out there, maybe not all the underlying inputs, but the results of these prioritizations are ones we want to incorporate in. We have the LCC boundary map in here, and we're thinking about actually adding an LCC theme to Landscope just to quickly highlight all the data that is emerging from the LCC to provide a place where you could view it all in one area nationally.
Well, I would bet that because of the funding challenge that the LCCs are facing here, I bet Landscope there'll be a lot more folks coming to you all for help, I bet.
We invite that. Yeah, it is concerning. We've shared our voice of concern about that, but yeah. We will see what happens.
Yeah. Are there any plans to take this concept internationally?
Yes, we have some data from Canada in here and some of the layers that bleed across north and south borders. The name Landscope America, the genesis of the tool was funded by a funder who had a focus on the U.S. But we've actually talked, and we just haven't done it yet. We've talked about adding an S to that and really making sure it's inviting of users and contributors and publishers throughout the Americas. NatureServe's network spans the Americas, and our network partners want to contribute more information into Landscope. So yes, is the short answer.
Great. I'm going to open up the lines here. Sometimes we get a little bit of feedback, but I'm going to unmute everyone here. So if anyone wants to ask a question on the phone, feel free to do so. Hey, Jonathan and Suzanne, are you guys there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Why don't you guys talk about real quick, if we have the time, talk about like how this has helped you guys in your work for the Park Service.
Right.
I'll let Suzanne take that.
Yeah. So this is Suzanne and Jonathan Doherty, who is our office's primary lead on our relationship with NatureServe, just stepped out of the room, so you'll have to get my version of it. We've had a cooperative agreement and various tax agreements with NatureServe for several years now, and really the relationship was one of many things that stemmed from the Chesapeake Bay Executive Order signed during the Obama administration, and what our relationship with NatureServe enabled us to do is, when pulling together federal, state, local agencies, nonprofit partners, and even organizations that represent the private sector, Landscope Chesapeake was a way for us to bring all of our data together, especially across jurisdictions, because state by state, they define conservation differently. They define cultural heritage differently. Some states have state heritage areas, some don't. So Landscope enabled us to bring all these data layers together and essentially enable people to talk their different languages across jurisdictions or areas of interest with one another. So we could start to look across those boundaries at areas of concern that might link together from a natural heritage perspective and identify funding mechanisms for addressing conservation priorities. So really, if you think of the mapping service as like a translator service almost, for us to be able to translate our needs and help to understand one another's and identify ways that we could collaborate. And the service and our relationship with NatureServe has evolved since then as their platform and ArcGIS and GIS technology has advanced to take on more capabilities. So now we can do things like reporting across jurisdictions and developing maps that speak to different needs or concerns at the time.
Great. Jonathan, anything to add? Well, Lori and Nick, yeah, thank you again. Great presentation and a lot of good questions. And I'm sure the next presentation from Judy Teague on August 15 at 3 o'clock will be really interesting and a nice add-on to your presentation today. Any final thoughts or anything for the group? Lori and Nick? Lori and Nick, are you guys there?
Oh yes, we're here now.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Okay, so
Okay.
yeah. I was just gonna ask if any final thoughts or any other reflections that you think is important.
I guess just to reiterate that while we focused a lot on the Chesapeake, there is a good bit of data throughout the U.S. and in some cases north and south of the U.S. And we would really encourage feedback in terms of, you know, if you have questions about how you can best use the tool, if you're interested in getting more involved in getting your data published in or having a portal for the area of the country where you're working. It is a platform that scales and can support activities like is happening in the Chesapeake throughout. So it really is an opportunity to scale up in your area, and we'd really encourage working with you. So let us know. We've got our contact info on the screen.
Great. Well, thank you, Lori, Nick. I mean, this is a fantastic tool. Again, everyone with the Park Service, it's on our toolkit. Encourage you guys to explore it. I mean, you know, for those parks that are out there that may not know who their potential partners may be that they can work with, you know, just, you know, learning about those land trusts, like you guys said, Lori, like you mentioned, just that tool in and of itself is super helpful for finding folks to work with, and at the end of the day, better protecting park resources. So, yes, awesome tool. Thank you again, and thanks everyone for joining this month's webinar, and we'll talk with you next month, August 15, again at 3 o'clock is when we'll have Judy Teague with NatureServe talk about the Natural Communities Project. So thanks again, everyone.
Bye. Thank
you.
you.
All right. Thanks.